So I was hoping to talk a little bit about financial statements today in the context of the representations and warranties. And the reason I want to talk about them is because the financial statements representation tends to get the most attention and focus from business people involved in a deal. Financial statements are the language of business. And when we make representations around them, as opposed to all the other representations in the agreement that tend to be very legalistic, it really draws in the attention of the business people. Financial statements rep is generally pretty simple. It covers three different topics in one. It'll say that the financial statements that have been provided are true, accurate, and complete copies of the company's actual financial statements. It'll say that the financial statements fairly present the financial condition and the operations and the cash flows of the business at the date or for the time period represented therein. And the third representation, it will say, is that they were prepared in accordance with GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles. There are all kinds of ways that the parties can negotiate the words in those each of those three main concepts and change the fundamental meaning. But the most important of these is the GAAP representation, because for many companies, their financial statements are not prepared in accordance with GAAP. And in fact, for smaller companies, hardly any of their financial statements are prepared in accordance with GAAP, because GAAP is a very complex set of rules that for smaller businesses, it's just not worth it to actually spend the resources to make sure your financial statements comply. And the effect of that can be very significant for a seller if they say their financial statements were prepared in accordance with GAAP, and it turns out they weren't, and most of them won't be. When the deal closes, the buyer may recognize the discrepancies between generally accepted accounting principles and what they were told, and the difference could be significant dollars that a seller would be on the hook for. So this is one to pay close attention to if you're a seller, particularly a smaller business that is unlikely to have GAAP qualified statements. And of course, you'll always have the option of identifying how your statements vary from GAAP to avoid that kind of liability.